how much control collective government had over the population. They saw how much money was being brought in. And they said, whoa, wait a second here. They wrote a better blueprint for communism and total control. We got to follow their principle. Now, we had the money and the wealth building. This is the wealthiest country in the world. But when you have massive wealth, there's 100% potential for massive theft. And when the public's being entertained off in la-la land over here, and everyone's cutting their deals behind closed doors over here from within government, the public never stood a chance in hell of not getting burnt out of opportunity. The corporate board meetings, large corporations. You know, people were saying, oh, those corporations are outsourcing, sending jobs to Mexico, China, Russia. Wrong. Most of them would have stayed here in this country. Who was promoting to the board of directors to outsource were the shareholders. Who were the shareholders? Collectively, government. You break down any Fortune 500 company and look at the tens of thousands of local governments. They may own between 68% to as high as, I've seen as high as 91% of a company. They've taken over in collective ownership. You will not find any one city, county, or state owning more than 5%. There are limitations on any local government on how much they can buy of one corporation. But if you have, say, New York State, City of Manhattan buys 5%, City of Brooklyn buys 5%, State of New York buys 5%, the State Retirement Fund of New York buys 5%. Those 5% add up. You know, there's only so many nickels in a dollar. And they can actually target any corporation or industry group and effectively take it over. Now, they can't network between themselves. Oh, we're going to use our influence. We own 71% of that corporation. We're going to tell them what to do. That's a monopoly. And being government, there's still certain restrictions in play. So the way they got around that was through the creation of private financial associations. You may now have 12,000 local governments as members. And they can sign their proxy voting rights for the shares they own over to the private association. So that private association now can walk into, say, a board meeting at ExxonMobil, representing 12,000 local governments, which just happen to own 61% of the corporation. Effectively, that person could fire the entire board of directors by proxy. Okay, it's a phenomenal control. He can direct where they're going to spend their multi-billion-dollar advertising budgets with ABC, CBS, NBC, wherever. Okay? So they've created control over the majority of the large corporations through investment. Now, the way they pulled this off was rather brilliant. This plan went into motion back in the 40s, after World War I. Wars allow for massive theft. You can clean out entire countries' treasuries and shift it over to yourself. Well, World War II, there was massive theft that took place. Hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars were liberated and taken. And they said, okay, well, we just pulled off a nice little theft and confiscation. Let's now set the principles in motion for peacetime, but to give us the position to control and build our wealth. It's always been about wealth transfer, transferring someone else's wealth into your pocket. Okay? Government gave the ability as an organized structure to be an administrative clearinghouse for revenue collection. Now, most government employees that I've spoken to, they don't have a clue. They're just like us. They're doing their job. Well, I got a nice pension, getting a good pay, and got to do my job, and so forth. 95% of the government employees don't have a clue what's taking place. The upper level management, they know. You know, they're seeing bits and pieces of the forest. The lower level government employee, he's surrounded by leaves. He doesn't even see a tree, you know, through the leaves. So there's very few people that have a perspective on the whole picture. But when you look at the fundamental basics, all of a sudden the picture becomes crystal clear. But the Federal Reserve was a brilliant move on the part of the boys to take it all over. A gold and silver-backed currency, which up until '63 and they phased out gold and silver. There was not enough gold and silver to back the intrinsic value of the United States. And in fact, probably at that time they had less than 5% of the gold and silver necessary to back up what was in circulation. And, you know, the value, the intrinsic value. So they switched over to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, by the way, is a private association, kind of like the Boy Scouts, you know, Knights of Columbus, you know, a very close government authority working with it. And they have membership banks participating with the Federal Reserve. And by being a member bank, they get certain privileges and benefits and so forth, as long as they intercooperate within guidelines. I've heard people say, well, it's in the Federal Reserve. You know, well, it's like saying, let's cancel the Boy Scouts. Yeah, you do. You still have a lot of Boy Scouts. You know, they're just no longer members of the association. So all the banks go off separately doing what they want to do by themselves. Because the association is strictly a private association. The banks are just members, you know, following certain guidelines. But by creating the Federal Reserve, they were now able to expand the money supply each and every year, dealing with the value. You know, a dollar is a bartering tool. It's a piece of paper with ink and print on it, okay? But as an accepted bartering tool is where it has value. Polynesian countries, way back when, they used to use seashells as bartering tools. Okay, they've used gold and silver and, you know, what are cattle, wheat, corn, soybeans, you know, bartering tools. The dollar is a good bartering tool. Fits in an ATM. The seashells didn't, so they used the dollar. But as they expanded the growth of the dollar and the money was recycled back in through government, government would collect a massive amount of money, put it out in services to the public. But each year, they're pulling off 2, 3, 4%, 5%, really good year, maybe 8%, and investing it. Well, each year, another 2, 3, 4, 5% invested. Next year, 2, 3, 4, 5% invested. Well, that adds up each year. And over 65 years, government took it all over by investment. The Fortune 500 companies, the banks as being the #1 investor, the insurance companies. Now, in the news a while back, Hershey, the chocolate company, they were going to move their plant down to Mexico. Now, the corporation and the directors, no way. You know, they loved being in Hershey, Pennsylvania. They were a landmark. You know, it was the spirit of Hershey, Pennsylvania. They didn't want to move. The stockholders, government, wanted them to outsource to Mexico because they'd get 6, 7, 800% higher profits. Who were the collective government bartering to get them to move? Local and federal government management being networked through the private associations. What did they do to sweeten the deal? They also gave Hershey a $700 million bond, you know, issuance under Hershey to give them the money to build their plants down in Mexico to guarantee this new 6, 7, 800% profit. Now, on my website, which is CAFR1.com, stands for Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, CAFR1.com. On the front page, you'll see a big red button. It says CAFR Downloads. I put a few example CAFRs up there for states and cities and counties. But you'll also see the audit of the Federal Reserve, which is their annual financial report. I have 2009, 8, and 7 up there. You'll see the audit of the IRS up there. Okay? Very good thing to look at. One report which caught my eye, and I made sure I put it up, I usually don't get floored. But at the end of 2008, you know, I trade the futures market, commodities, gold, silver, cattle, wheat, corn, currencies. Done that for 32 years. I was a CTA, commodity trading advisor, for 14 years. Used to be a tenant up at the World Trade Center. Did an international news line via satellite, primarily on silver and U.S. Treasury bonds. And as I learned this about government, you know, one revelation after another. Well, for the last couple of years, I thought I caught it all. End of 2008, came across a report. Comptroller of Currencies puts out an audit of the banks, their top derivative holdings.